Welcome back, my friends, to the Sweet Spot, where IT leaders share their insight with our leaders and others that want to lead. My name is Carlos Vargas, and as in every week, I have my two co-hosts, Howard Holton or Lewis. Hello, guys.
Hey there.
Gentlemen, how's it going?
Bourbon or coffee?
Like as a general question, the answer is bourbon. I try to avoid bourbon during the day, even on the weekends, but I'm not a huge coffee fan. That's not really true. I'm too lazy to make coffee. And
Coffee exclusive.
I don't put up with poor coffee.
Wait. So we have another battle: coffee versus bourbon. Who will reign supreme?
Yeah, I'm not sure I can have another take though. Not like I've tried bourbon.
Right. Paul's opinion is a little light on half of that argument. But also, bourbon always wins because for two reasons. One, the more drunk you get, the less willing you are to listen to other people's opinions, and two, if it ever does turn physical, the drunk guy always can take a punch. Just saying it, you know. But how about coffee versus tea?
Coffee versus tea, yes. That's a good conversation. I could go through that.
I'll take tea every time. But
Coffee.
It's Earl Grey or English breakfast, and it's with cream every time. Or milk.
Interesting. Mine's more time dependent. I'm a pre-noon tea, post-noon coffee kind of consumer.
See, I generally like tea more as my day winds down rather than as my day starts.
Interesting.
Because my days start. I'm not a morning person, so they start a little rough anyhow. So if I were to do coffee, like I'm more tolerant of like a bitter coffee kind of quick drink in the morning than I would be in the afternoon.
I want coffee the whole day. You know,
I have partaken since my return on India with evening masala chai beverages, double boil the milk too. It was pretty good. It takes a little longer, but at least it's a nice beverage to calm your nerves at the end.
Yeah, I do like a masala chai. There's a place by me that does a really good masala chai. Their Indian food is fine. Their masala chai is very good, and they give me free refills, which I quite enjoy. Yeah. They lose money on the whole meal when they give me free refills of masala chai.
Is it all you can eat Indian buffet?
It is not. It is not, but I'll sit and drink a good 5 or 6 cups of masala chai.
Nice.
Yeah, I sure hope there's caffeine in it.
In a clay cup or is this ceramic?
Ceramic.
See, the clay cup actually makes it taste different. You should attempt and see if there's anyone who serves it in a clay cup.
I'll have to see if I can find a place. Toronto's got a beat on food. Denver's not the food mecca that.
No, that's not where people
like Denver's not even if there was a Mecca hotel in Vegas that was a poor representation and glitzy version of Mecca. You get what I'm saying? Denver doesn't even come that high.
I see.
Like it's not even any version of a Mecca.
Any diamond restaurants there?
I mean, we have
any Michelin stars there.
There is no Michelin stars in Colorado. There might be one in like Vail or something, but no, nothing near me.
Right.
So now that we know if it's coffee or tea, what about if we take some hot takes on something that people are talking about? What is your take on AI and machine learning? People keep using it interchangeably. What about some tags that you guys are looking at as executives? What is your take on the whole on AI and
see? I find grandiose topics like that to be not interesting. So, tell me about cloud computing. Tell me about AI machine learning. Tell me about IT decision making. Tell me about analytics. Like all of those are just, the topics are too big. And what I find that, especially in the last couple of podcasts I've done, where they've asked me about such specific things to create a hot take on, that you kind of have to in real time make a decision whether you think it's practical enough to implement. So I'll give you an example, and you tell me whether you think this is something you can have a hot take on. Can you tell me whether the additional value of GPT-4 above Chat GPT-3 is enterprise ready?
No, it is not.
Here's your hot take.
I don't even.
Why is it enterprise
It
ready?
still makes stuff up,
Right.
right? Until it stops making things up, ChatGPT is not enterprise ready. Enterprise ready means I can give it to anyone in the organization, and anyone in the organization can get value from it and use it and trust it, and it is not trustworthy today.
So will it ever be enterprise ready when it's leveraging outside versus if you build your own?
It doesn't matter. So ChatGPT, if they were to release an enterprise version of ChatGPT, ChatGPT fundamentally will never be enterprise ready because it makes things up. Right? Is there a generative AI model that doesn't make things up, or that would conceivably not make things up? Sure, but we haven't seen one yet. Right? And I think that's what people are missing on generative AI. ChatGPT 4 is a massive improvement. Right? And there's another generative AI that's set to be released that's light years ahead of GPT-4, and it's all in the number of training points that they're using, and they're not called training points, but it's effectively what they are. As you increase those, the value of the AI improves exponentially. But as long as it can just make shit up, it's going to continue to lack value. Right? It's going to continue to not be able to be trusted for truly for enterprise work. And anybody that uses it, great, go for it, have fun. I'm sure we'd get a ton of comments saying, "But I'm using it today." Cool, but you're using something that lies.
But isn't that just
There's
like
also a practical implication, right? The practical implication of it costing $30 to $50 to $70 to $100,000 per month to run would suggest to you that we're not really at the cost scale to replace an individual person, right? If we're talking about $1 million to run on an annual basis, it would have to be a pretty significant amount of replacement in order to invest that kind of money. But to go along with what Howard's saying, really the big problem in its current implementation is that while it might be able to write a bunch of stuff, what it can't do is edit other people's stuff, right? Which is really what development and coding is about, right? It's not because it could develop, some snippets of code. It's because when you build an application, it requires many snippets of code that have to interact with each other and have different purposes. But even more importantly, there are versions to this code, right? It's not just, hey, give me a function that saves a customer data into a data model. It's, hey, by the way, it does this now, but version 2 is this other thing, and version 3 is this other thing, and version 42 has to do this other thing over time. It doesn't have that edit function, right? It only has that create function.
It also has to be able to do it in a way that fits with the kind of corporate standards and practices of their software architecture, and it doesn't have the ability to do that today. Right. I can say, I can tell it like what language to use and kind of what framework to use. It may lie, it may cheat, it may not do that at all. But what it's not going to do is follow my language parameters, my kind of style guide, as it were, within my organization. And that's equally as important. Right. And so when generative AI, when ChatGPT 5 becomes kind of an enterprise model where you can get an enterprise subscription, feed it your data, and it starts to give you things that are personalized to your company, it's still going to be lacking in many ways in these things, and still going to require humans that are equipped to deal with the foibles of generative AI. All right, so that's hot take 1. What's our next topic?
Hot take 2. Okay, ready? Under the category of data and analytics, there is a loosely use the word trend, talking about implementation of a trans-analytic database. In other words, a database can that be both OLTP and OLAP. Is this a likely or unlikely trend and implementation, and why?
I mean, I think it's a likely I think it's a likely target. At the same time, I'm not sure it solves the. I'm not sure that solves the problem that we're actually having. Right? Like I don't think the database model's the problem. I think the data quality is a far bigger problem than the database model. So I'm not sure that I'm not sure how much I really care about that. Like if you gave me that functionality tomorrow, I'm still gonna have a data quality problem. I'm still gonna have a who the heck put this in here? Why do I have 7 copies of this record? Which one's authoritative? Right? I'm still gonna have all of the kind of organizational problems around how my data is created and curated that the data modeling doesn't solve. Is it something we shouldn't do? No, it likely is, and I'm sure someone will solve it before long if they maybe haven't already, right? Again, I think people would argue that there's probably someone that solved it already. But I don't think I don't even think it's worthy of a conversation when we're talking about analytics, because it's not really like I don't care.
Well, well, certainly, big guys, big vendors have invested in at least the architecture of a translytic database. My guess is when you turn the page, it looks a lot like an OLAP database, right? I think what's likely to be true is that OLTP databases, prime databases for application development use, especially very chatty ones, will remain the same. However, OLAP databases, ones used for analytics, might also be extended to do some primary or rudimentary OLTP type services. In other words, I have an analytic database that produces a cool visualization in a portal, and then you might also collect some metadata based on the things that you see, right? Minor OLTP to support it. And then one could argue, I guess, if I'm doing create read updates to that database, it's now comes translytic, right? I would kind of refer to that as OLAP plus versus translytic, where the actual single database performs both functions, mostly because the performance tune of a database that's chatty is very different than a performance of a view only one, right? So it would be weird to try to mesh those together.
That's kind of my problem. I don't know why I care. It's not that doesn't come to the top 10 list of problems I'd really like to solve. Within analytics. So I'm not sure. Like, it'd be cool if it was solved, and it'd be cool if we only had one database type. If OLTP and OLAP were one thing, right? OLTAP, I guess.
OLTAP.
But I don't. Again, like it's not. It's so far off my radar of stuff that I think would really make a difference inside an organization that I'm not sure. I'm not sure why it matters. And then I have application tuning issues that would then create. So again, I'm not sure. You know what I mean? Like my ERP, I generally don't have 40% of my CPU sitting around for my ERP to then have all of my analytics run on my OLTP database anyhow. So I'm not sure how combining those two solves that particular issue, right? Am I then going to continually have this fight between the two sides of the organization fighting over resources and attention for tuning of the application of their applications, because we've combined these into the same things, versus and the number of organizations that would just say, screw it, we're going back to the way we did it before because it's a less political headache, would outweigh the immediate benefits of having those in the same system, right?
Right.
So I go back to what I said originally. All right, next hot take.
Hot take number 3. What is the appropriate order? And then what's the reality of implementing data governance, data strategy, data engineering?
I think it's strategy, governance, then engineering, but I think strategy. Like that, you could argue that engineering could go before strategy to some degree, because engineering also involves like doing an assessment, would fall under engineering, right? And I kind of need an assessment before strategy.
Is this a should be answer or an actually is answer? Because I think they're different.
That's true. I think the actually is answer is engineering comes first, then governance and strategy fight over whose responsibility is to come second, and then the other one comes third. But I think the reality is it should be data strategy, followed by data governance, followed by data engineering. Like, I think I need to know what the value is I'm going to get from the data. Then I need to know how I can responsibly use the data. And then I need to start using the data. That's my logic.
I agree. I think what usually gets done is data engineering to solve one to few problems or create one to few insights, right? And then they determine that these insights actually created value. So maybe we should go back to the starting line and do some strategy to see what our next set of use cases should be. And then you find out that you're consuming so much data, you're not sure whether you're allowed to see some of that data. So you start to look at the governance aspect of it.
Yeah.
Kind of how, even if that's not the right mix, that's kind of how it's worked.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Which leads to hot take number 4. Are we at right now?
Yeah, 4.
Is analytical self-service even possible? And by that, I'll be more explicit. Will we get to a world where a marketing analyst, a controller, some person in the manufacturing plant will be able to query and consume insights on their own?
Until we have a generative AI we can trust, I would say no. However, I firmly believe that if we have generative AI we can trust and we have reasonable data quality, I think the answer is yes. I don't think we're that far away from it, especially in for very kind of specific things. I don't think we're far away from it. I think Microsoft is doing some things with their kind of AI model that's related to the personalization of your individual data or the data that you have particular access to. That should be viewed as self-serve data analytics, even though they're wrapping it in an AI wrapper. Does that mean we're going to have a broad self-service analytics platform where you can deal with the corpus of corporate data, kind of run your own scenarios, create things wholly from scratch and have that work? No, not in the near term. But I do think I do think with reasonable data quality and a good generative AI model that we can trust, I think we're close to being able to do things that are a little bit more personal and self-service without being kind of that grandiose self-service utopia that we talked about 5 years ago.
Yeah, I think my hot take is I think it's technically possible, but I think our limitation is data literacy. And by that I mean I think the consumers of this analytical report or question needs to be answered does not have the appropriate understanding of the model, what a customer is, what a product is, what a transaction is, what a supply chain is, nor could really appreciate what it would take to ask the right question in order to get an appropriate answer.
Well, I think that also touches on, I don't think there's an organization in the world that wouldn't be exhausted by the business culture effort required to get to the level of literacy required to make true data self-service a real thing. Right? You're right back into the EIM kind of argument, right? Which was an elephant you had to eat all of it and everybody burned out on it. Like just to get to the point where your organization truly agrees on the definition of terms necessary to have a global self-service analytics model doesn't really happen anywhere, right? And that's required. Like everyone has to agree, and I mean everyone, every single employee that has access has to agree. What do we mean by an order? What do we mean by a sale? What do we mean by a purchase? What do we mean by a customer? All of those things must be known, and you can't argue over it. And organizations argue over that exact point all the time. Right? And until that happens, no, you can't. You're not going to get to self-service, right? And if you can't even solve that, it doesn't matter. The rest of it's moot, right? because I'm pulling data from 12 sources. Each of those 12 have different definitions of one or more of those things, and it doesn't matter. My data quality is shot.
Hot take number 5?
5.
Hot take number 5. Is IaaS dead? By that I mean this. Is IaaS so commodity that every cloud is the same, every price is relatively close, that it doesn't really matter? And more specifically, all of the migrations of applications that could be done are done. And therefore, since what's remaining is modernization, which is not likely going to be IaaS, is IaaS dead?
No, I disagree with your premise.
It's a question. I wasn't giving you a
No, I know.
either way.
But part of the premise within the question was the application modernization will be done in some sort of PaaS or SaaS, and I disagree with that. I don't think I think a high percentage, sure, but I think a high percentage is 73%, just to pull a number completely from nowhere. I don't think
Mark that down, Carlos. You said 73%.
I don't think it's above. I don't think it's above 80%, right?
Okay.
Because you still have, your Kubernetes is still. I'm not sure you're going to consume Kubernetes at scale as PaaS within every cloud provider necessarily. Maybe you will. Maybe you will. I guess it depends on which provider you choose, how well integrated they are. But at the same time, that's a tough question. Is IaaS dead from that?
Will that depend on the maturity level of that company?
Well, no, because you're still going to use IaaS, and Paul's not saying you're not going to use IaaS, right? The question wasn't, will you not use IaaS? The question was, is IaaS a key decision maker in your cloud strategy? And I would say it absolutely is not. If I could just slightly reframe the question.
Sure.
It absolutely is not. Rather, don't make the decision on who has the IaaS you think you like. Make the decision based on who has the PaaS or SaaS that's going to be an accelerator that you believe to be an accelerator for your business. Who has the platforms that you're going to be able to train to? Who has the standards that you're going to be able to align to? Because their IaaS will likely serve as well as anyone else's IaaS. And that would be what I would say.
Yeah. Here's my hot take answer. And disagree with me if you wish, but I truly believe it's true. IaaS is so commodity that the innovations that every cloud is doing in their IaaS now is edge case specific. More in as an example, all the new iterations of the cores, the GPUs, the TPUs that come out aren't to solve store customer problems. It's to deal with volume, variety, velocity problems in edge cases. And I don't mean computing edge, as we debated a few times ago. I mean edge outsider cases. And therefore, if all of their innovations are doing in IaaS are to suit the few and not the many, then it really doesn't matter. There's nothing really happening in the rest of the IaaS world, and therefore it's part of your solution set, but certainly not the main part of your modernizations in your applications.
I mean, I don't even think it's a concern, right? Because it is so commoditized. They might as well all be the same, right? And any one of them that isn't the I don't know, perfectly priced to the other guy will be perfectly priced to the other guy in a matter of days. You know what I mean? Because they're constantly in that battle, in that pricing battle, to make sure that they're priced the same as the other guy. So it's not even worth looking at the pricing,
right?
If today you make a choice for the next for your contract life because Azure is the cheapest for the compute you need, tomorrow AWS will match it or now be cheaper by a tenth of a penny. So you can't even make that decision because it changes, it fluctuates like the commodity market, right? And yeah, to your point, right? The GPU TPU kind of innovations that they're doing are for companies that are so bleeding edge there is no PaaS for them, and they're likely building their own PaaS.
Right.
right? So yeah, again, right, not an innovation that anyone should care about who doesn't really know they should care about it. And a lot of those companies are even seeing the value in pulling that stuff back to a data center.
So hot take 6, sticking with cloud. Why did we need, and do we continue to need, yet another abstraction layer? How long will containers survive?
I don't see the end to containers. I see the end to virtual machines.
Interesting.
Um,
So we will eliminate a layer of abstraction.
I mean, kind of. I think it's just going to get absorbed and kind of become something else, right? Like today, I can run VMs on top of Kubernetes with KubeVirt. Theoretically, right? Like theoretically, it's solidly fragile right now. There's some commercial companies that are effectively running it for you to make it not fragile. But containers were super fragile when they first started too, right?
Sure.
The advantage that I see kind of long term is you're not going to be able to pick one cloud, and each of the cloud providers want to bake you into their language, right?
Right.
And at this point, it's assembly language, right? The advantage of the abstraction layer and kind of where it's heading, and why all these third parties exist and will continue to exist. Maybe not the same third parties, but third parties will continue to exist. Is you need an abstraction layer away from the cloud vendors in the same way that we use virtual machines to abstract away from the hardware. We now need a virtual cloud layer that abstracts away from the language of Amazon, Azure, Google, Oracle, IBM, whoever, so that we have the ability to move things where they make sense. Just because they operate in roughly the same regions, there may be a reason I need it in that block versus 70 miles away or 300 miles away. And I need the flexibility to choose that as these things become more distributed and more complex. And it may need to be in both. It may need to be, I may need an application that runs in both because peering and time and whatever other reasons, resiliency, kind of on and on and on. And without that abstraction layer, it's nigh unto impossible. It's just so complex to speak the language of the individual cloud provider. Right.
So your vote is for yet another abstraction layer.
No, I think the abstraction layers are all kind of evolving. And that's kind of, it's one of the things that we're seeing more and more with like Kubernetes management software, right? Is the Kubernetes is simple, it's done, it's kind of handled. Not that we're not going to continue to develop it, but you're not really talking at that layer now anyways. You're talking at the management layer.
Right.
And those management layers are becoming more kind of multi-cloud view. And so that's really kind of going to end up being the place that I think we're going to end up talking, right? Some of the things that Terraform promised and never really delivered.
Hot take number 7.
Yep.
Sticking with cloud still.
Man, you're really stuck on cloud today.
No, the first several were data. This is only the third on cloud. Industry clouds, real or not? Is there going to be a financial services cloud, a government cloud, a healthcare cloud, a media and entertainment cloud? Does it matter? Does it actually provide any value other than communities of interest?
I think it's lipstick on a pig. Honestly, it's architecture more than anything. And I think the danger is that it becomes anything other than architecture, because then you just have more lock-in, right? There are, Amazon already speaks a different language than Azure, already speaks a different language than Google. If it's Amazon's financial services cloud, that's going to speak a totally different dialect than Amazon, which will be a totally different language and dialect than Azure's financial services cloud. And so I think it's dangerous to start kind of leaning into that. And it just feels like lipstick on a pig right now.
I think realistically, there's more overlap than underlap on regulatory and legislative boundaries on most of these things, right? Financial services versus healthcare, as an example, in that they all have to maintain the same set of standards anyway, so you might as well just run it in the same cloud. Right? Doesn't really need to be, other than communities of interest, distinction in each one of those clouds, with the only exception being federal government cloud, which needs some distinction in some way, maybe specifically just in the US, but mostly to separate fascism and Marxism and authoritarianism and democracies, right?
Well, I mean, yeah, the government has specific
cloud should be distinct from India's cloud, distinct from US's cloud, government-wise, federal government-wise.
Yeah. I think federal cloud separation is important for a whole variety of reasons that we could have I think a whole podcast on. But yeah, as a hot take, I think you touched all of them, so it's great.
Perfect. Hot take number 8. Now we're out of cloud. We've gone beyond cloud.
Now we're in outer space.
Is Metaverse a perfectly reasonable customer interaction? Is
No.
the immersion that's possible with Metaverse actually a channel that somebody should consider?
Oh, so is virtual reality as a communication methodology a channel that is reasonable?
If you want to redefine Metaverse to just virtual reality, sure.
Yeah, but Metaverse is a corporate-owned Facebook. It's Meta, but Facebook product and product name. So no, I think Metaverse needs to die a horrible, fiery death. There's way too much corporate control in the internet now, and taking what is the next version of the internet and putting that under a single corporate banner is hugely problematic. However, do I think that there is a Web 3 or a Web 4 that has a virtual component to it, that would enable kind of the next version of the world, which is really the Metaverse from Snow Crash, kind of, that was even corporate owned. Yes, I think there is. But I would also caution, like, go read Snow Crash. Neil Stephenson wrote it in 1987 ish, and it is where the term metaverse came from, and it is where the description of that virtual world came from. But look at the world that exists outside of it too. I'm not sure it's good for humanity if Metaverse becomes what he kind of painted, or what any corporation would want, right? I have yet to see anything that has that as a story that's not also got a dystopian quality to it.
Right. It all of a sudden became, the playground of the evil.
Well, no,
because
it became the playground that you wanted to exist in because it was better than the world as it existed outside of it. It
right.
was completely corporate controlled. It's a cash machine that you're constantly dumping money into, and because it has the freedom to be anything that you want it to be, what does that do for the world where it's hard to make it the way you want it to be? Do we end up with Ready Player One, right? If you remember the stacks in Ready Player One, right? Do we all end up living in storage units, which is what happened in Snow Crash, right? Look at Gamer. Gamer's another one that while no one probably remembers that movie, is another movie where people lived in virtual reality, right? Is that really what we want to do? And so, but I would caution, every single one of those is because a corporation controlled that virtual interaction, right? I don't think that's the smart thing for us to allow in any way, shape, or form, right? And I think if we look at what they're trying to do with Web 3.0, we start to see why the distributed nature of all of that movement starts to become valuable and important.
If we look at VR, AR specifically, and call Metaverse that, I would say that it's an interesting channel for certain customer segments, but it certainly isn't going to be a primary channel. It's not going to displace a digital channel. It absolutely won't displace an in-person physical channel. It's interesting for a certain segment of clientele, and I'm not sure it has any legs for the future.
I think that's risky, right? I mean, look at the death of the Concord. The death of the Concord didn't happen because it crashed. It didn't happen because it was expensive. It happened because the very people that were using it to communicate in person switched to teleconferences, right? And so I think anytime we say this technology can't replace that because this version of it is simply better, I think there's a wake up involved, right? I mean, look at we're no longer in a pandemic, we're in an endemic, right? Whatever COVID is here to stay in the way that it's here to stay. We'll see hotspots from time to time, but ultimately, conference attendance is down, number of conferences are down, and companies have clawed back travel expenses for in-person meetings like crazy because they've determined Teams and Zoom is good enough, right? So I don't know that I would agree with you on the it'll never replace. I do think the technology as it sits today is not nearly good enough, but it doesn't.
The likelihood in my lifetime, and maybe it's just on my lifetime, that I won't be able to drive to Main Street and see a bunch of stores to which I can buy a product in is zero.
Well, yeah, but you say that as those two things are direct alternatives to each other, rather than additions to.
Okay, sure, it's additions to, but I still think those stores will exist. They will thrive. They will grow. There'll be more of them. There's not more. I keep coming back to this. I was in Hyderabad, and they have 100,000 biryani shops. There are more biryani shops than any other type of shops in Hyderabad. Oddly enough.
Yeah, but there's
and it's
in there
growing year by year.
In Hyderabad, like
what was
how
that?
big is Hyderabad? It's like 400 million people. There's some ridiculous thing in it. It's just absolutely enormous.
Just the core little city part is 10 million, and that's like a few square blocks.
Right.
Yeah, lots of people. Okay, what are we up to now? Are we on to 9?
No, we're going to 9.
All right, 9. Quantum computing, is there an enterprise implementation now?
Is there an enterprise implementation?
Can I consume it now? Is there a use case now? Enterprise. Not edge, but enterprise.
I don't know the answer to that question, to be honest. I know that there are some that are running that are like technically available. I'm not sure that they work.
I agree with that assessment. Certainly technically available. If you wanted to call IBM and implement it in your shop, if you're a bank or a telco or an insurance company, you probably could. Could it solve some specific quantification problems that's interesting to product and pricing? Maybe, right? But I think the use cases drop off pretty quickly at some point. Yep. Last one. Hot take number 5. Are you ready?
Yep.
10.
10, I mean, that's it. 5. 10. The last several years, hot topic in IT was ESG.
Yeah.
I have not heard those three letters in at least 3 quarters.
Oh, I hear them all the time.
Is it now not a topic, or am I just listening to wrong sources?
You're listening to the wrong sources. I literally hear it 3 times a week. I hear it all the time. I hear it more than I hear.
Purpose, reason changed? Because it used to be around the cost of cloud computing and how I'm going to creditize my organization to overcome that problem. Is it different now?
It's all about the carbon impacts now.
Okay.
All about, and it's massive in Europe. If you go to a conference in Europe, it's probably the number one topic of conversation. If you do a European podcast, it's probably their number one topic of conversation. They may not be the topic of conversation for the podcast, the episode that you do. You know what I mean? Because they may or may not ask. But
has there been regional differences? So is Europe more interested and Western Hemisphere less interested?
Yeah.
Or at least of recent? And do we think that's political?
Yeah.
What would be the reason?
Europe is legislating it.
Okay.
Yeah. They have specific climate targets that the West is ignoring. So,
all right, fair enough.
Yeah. And the state that Hyderabad is in has 40 million people.
40 million people. That's a lot.
That's a lot of people. The metro area is about 10, 11.
10. Yeah, that's the core. Even though it takes you a solid hour to get through that metro.
Yep.
All right, Carlos. Hot takes, 40 minutes straight.
So the hot takes are a lot. I try to take notes, but I think that as architects or leaders, what is the key for the leaders? Should they be paying attention to those technologies? Should they be looking at vendors that are pulling them away from their strategy towards some of these nuances or ideas, or should they just focus specifically in just going forward with what they were doing before?
I definitely think you need an opinion. Like at the very least, have a read up, have a perspective, have an opinion, determine whether it applies to you, make a decision either way on whether I need to investigate it in a deeper sense. But being ignorant of the topic won't help you.
I think that they may
Yeah, I
be.
agree. I think you need to be aware of what's going on. I think you need to be at least aware enough that you that you have an opinion and maybe more, that you can have a conversation, but that you can have a conversation about how that thing has value or impacts your company, your role, your business unit. That doesn't mean you need to do anything about it. Even if it has an impact, doesn't mean you need to do anything about it. But I think you need to be able to say, we're looking at generative AI. We think it could have this impact to our business. We're not doing it yet because of this, or we are doing it now because of this. Right? It may not need to be any deeper than that. Same with quantum computing. Same with Metaverse. Same with ESG. And I'd probably say ESG is higher than the other three, but yeah, I think that's important to be able to talk about. Except that OLAP one,
There you go,
that you can just let that one go.
Translytical databases.
Well, my friends, there you have it. 10 hot topics right now that you should be paying attention, understanding, or at least reading something about it. So take the time to read it, take the time to understand it, and take the time to share, subscribe, and we'll see you on our next episode.